Joe Biden was having the time of his life, man. Things were just going fantastically. Now, that doesn't mean that Joe Biden said many coherent things. In fact, Joe Biden said many things that were quite bizarre, and some of them were quite radical. He changed his positions on some pretty core issues. So let's start with the bizarre and the radical. So Joe Biden was specifically asked about police action. He has said this stupid thing in the past, and he said it again last night. He suggested that we need to train the police to shoot people in the leg. This is a talking point by morons. This is a talking point for people who don't know anything about policing and don't know anything about guns. This is not Gene Wilder in Blazing Saddles, guys. I mean, first, honestly, if we're going to do this, then really, they shouldn't even shoot the attacker in the leg. What they should do is shoot the gun or weapon out of an attacker's hand. Right? That's what they should shoot the trigger finger. They should make it so that you can't pull the trigger finger like in the movies. This is what Joe Biden actually thinks. Okay, so the way that law enforcement actually works is that in the heat of the moment, when you have just a split second to react, many of the shots go wild. This is why you are taught to fire until the threat is neutralized. You are taught to fire at center of body mass, specifically because very often you cannot aim at a particular part of the body. This comes from somebody who obviously has never really tried handling a handgun, and certainly not in a pressure situation. This idiotic notion that you can train police to shoot at limbs is the stupidest garbage ever put forth by people who talk about guns. So here's Joe Biden. He's done this multiple times, and it's amazing. No one asks, where's the follow-up from George Stephanopoulos? Why is it that not a single police department in America trains people to shoot at limbs? Because you cannot do that. It does not work. Here is Joe Biden laying this forth because he's an idiot.
There's a lot of things we've learned, and it takes time, but we can do this. You can ban chokeholds, but beyond that, you have to teach people how to de-escalate circumstances. De-escalate. So instead of anybody coming at you and the first thing you do is shoot to kill, you shoot them in the leg.
Shoot them in the leg. Shoot them in the leg. That's instead of shooting to kill, shoot them in the leg. That's amazing. Why I don't understand. Why don't the cops take out a lightsaber and just melt the bullets that are being shot at them, and then go over and disarm the person by cutting off their arm like Luke Skywalker does, or like Obi-Wan Kenobi or something. In fact, why don't the cops just use Wonder Woman's lasso of truth and actually just This is a presidential candidate who's supposed to be your serious presidential candidate. Speaking of serious presidential candidates, Joe Biden was asked once again on court packing. Once again, he declined to answer. He was not pressed by George Stephanopoulos. He said, don't worry, I'll tell you at some point. At some point, you'll find out. I mean, that point may never come, but sometime in the future, the future is full of murkiness and undecidedness, so at some point, I'll probably tell you. Here is Joe Biden not being asked a difficult question.
If they vote on it before the election, you are open to expanding the court?
I'm open to considering what happens from that point on.
You said so many times during the campaign, all through the course of your career, it's important to level with
It is,
American
but George,
people.
if I say, no matter what answer I gave you, if I say it, that's the headline tomorrow. It won't be about what's going on now, the improper way they're proceeding.
But don't voters have a right to know where you stand?
They do have a right to know where I stand, and they'll have a right to know where I stand before they vote.
So you'll come out with a clear position before Election Day?
Yes, depending on how they handle this.
Depending on how they handle this. I love that. Okay, so what should George Stephanopoulos' answer there be? Clearly, if he were a journalist, or if you were going to Savannah Guthrie this thing, he would say, okay, why not right now? Like, I'm looking at my watch here, Joe, and it turns out that today is, in fact, October 15th, and the election is going to be held in approximately 2.5 weeks. So you're running out of time, so why not do it right now? What's preventing you from doing it right now? And instead, Joe Biden's like, well, I'm just not going to tell you, everything's good. And George Stephanopoulos like, okay, Joe. All right, well, fair enough. Not fair enough. Oh, man. Okay, George Stephanopoulos, that's some harsh questioning right there. It shows you the media's standard for themselves. The media's standard is that if you are interviewing a Republican, you should act like Savannah Guthrie. And if you're interviewing Joe Biden, you should act like a doormat. That is the media double standard. And again, that doesn't alleviate the fact that Trump handled some questions badly last night and then he tweets dumb crap. These are separate issues. The media bias is very real. There's a reason conservatives distrust the media. There's a reason they distrust social media that continue to promote mainstream media. Okay, but back to Biden. So Biden said many, many radical things last night. He said yesterday that small children should be able to transition. I know that we're just going to gloss over this thing, but this is insane. This is insane. So a mother of a child who believes that he is transgender, an 8-year-old, 8 years old, gets up and says, Joe, what are you going to do for kids like mine? A boy who believes he's a girl, who believes he is transgender. And Joe Biden says we should allow 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds to transition. Those are children. So what he's talking about right now is allowing the treatment of a boy as a girl, not watchful waiting, but an 8-year-old says, I think I'm a girl today, and that kid is a boy. And you say, okay, darling, and then you go out and buy, and you call them your daughter. You literally start treating the boy as a girl. Okay, this is not best medical practice. There's not evidence to back that this is a good idea. But this is the left propaganda, which is that you can identify as a member of the opposite sex, right? You can just pick your opposite sex at the age of 8. At the age of 8, here is Joe Biden spilling this one out there. And he's going to effectuate federal policy in order to make this clear. So if you are a religious school, for example, then he is going to make it so that if a little boy comes in and he now wants to identify as a little girl and he wants to go to the girls' school, right? Because in a lot of religious communities, you have a separate boys' school and a separate girls' school. Mainly because once they hit teenage years, you want to keep those kids separated. Okay, but they have separate boys' schools and separate girls' schools. This is very traditional in the religious community. It's very traditional in the Jewish community, Catholic community, evangelical Protestant community, that Joe Biden will be the kind of person who believes that you should be able to take your boy and enlist that kid in the girls' school. And the school should simply deal with it. Not only that, on a fundamental level, believing that an 8-year-old should be able to transition is madness. It's absolute madness. I wouldn't let I have a 6-year-old. I would not let her choose how to cut her own hair, let alone how to shape her own sexual future. That's insane. And it's crazy. It's one thing you're talking about a 20-year-old. It's another thing. I mean, there are problems too, but if you're 20, at least you have the ability to think things through and consent. If you're 8, you don't. But here's Joe Biden yesterday basically standing up for the ability of 8-year-olds to transition.
The idea that an 8-year-old child or a 10-year-old child decides, I decided I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be. It'll make my life a lot easier. There should be zero discrimination. There is no reason to suggest that there should be any right denied your daughter or daughters, whichever, if one or two. One, your daughter, that your other daughter has a right to be and do. None. Zero.
Okay, it's not discrimination to deny a boy access to a girl's locker room. It is not discrimination to deny a boy 8 years old the ability to hormonally transition. The hell is he talking about? That is radical stuff. I know that the media portrays this as mainstream. That is deeply radical. And not only that, it will reach the point in American politics in very, very short order, because you're already seeing the early indicators, where if you as a parent say no to this, the government will intervene. And Joe Biden will back that. If you have an 8-year-old and your 8-year-old goes to school, your 8-year-old boy goes to school, and he says to the teacher, I feel like a girl today. And then the next day, your 8-year-old boy goes to school and he tells the teacher, I went home, I told mommy I feel like a girl, and mommy said, you're not a girl, you're a boy. The teacher calls Child Protective Services. Okay, we are this far from that. You watch. Within the next 5 years, this will become rote. Okay, that is something that is incredibly dangerous to children. It's incredibly dangerous to families. It's incredibly dangerous to basic human reason. What Joe Biden said there is radical. It is radical, and it is, to say an 8-year-old should be able to transition is pretty horrifying on every possible level. Okay, but it's treated as totally, not only normal, but sympathetic and good. Because 8-year-olds should be able to make their own decisions on everything, including what sex they are, in contravention of reality. All right? That is your moderate candidate, Joe Biden. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and share it with all of your friends.